Alright, good afternoon from Okinawa, Japan, home of Okisubis. Today, we're going to be talking about my setup, which is the EZ30 turbocharged Legacy. And we're going to be doing the ins and outs and ins, and the ups and downs and the pearl circles of what we had to do to make this thing happen. So stick around and enjoy the ride. Alright, so to turbocharge the Legacy, right, we'll start with the obvious. You have to make headers, downpipe, intercooler setup. And then you're going to have to do the oil lines to the turbo and the coolant lines if it's coolant cooled and whatnot. So we use Raptor headers. They have a nice, very clean setup. Instead of the 2-bolt flange, we went with a V-band. So we actually cut off the 2-bolt flange. I say 2-bolt flange, and then we cut it off and did a V-band setup. We'll attach a bunch of pictures. I took pictures along when I was actually doing the fabrication for it. And then you make the downpipe. That is pretty straightforward, except for it could be difficult routing, you know, but it'll be self-explanatory when we do the pictures. So we'll kind of tone down on the explanations from there. And then, so for the oil lines, right, we have a Mishimoto sandwich plate that is going to the oil cooler and is also supplying the oil to the turbo. The EZ30s, in my experience, looking at it with the oil pressure gauge, has a good amount of oil pressure. And the Garrett's, this is the G30-660, they do have a restrictor pill there to kind of restrict the oil to not have too much oil there. We've seen guys that turbocharge EZ30s in the past, and they have issues with oil kind of getting into the turbo because there's too much oil getting into the turbo. So we did the Turbo Smart oil pressure regulator. So this is the oil pressure regulator. It's about 40 PSI to the turbo. And then the return line, as you can kind of see here, the oil return line goes to the actual valve cover, and the oil return also goes to the valve cover. Everything is just tapped into the valve cover. Real simple. Yeah, and then the coolant lines, you have, most EJs will have it. EZ is the same. You have the coolant lines that go to the throttle body. I may be mistaken, but from what I've looked into and found out, it's to warm up the throttle body just in case if you have any type of frozen throttle body in cold situations. Okinawa does not snow. It's really hot. I didn't just go to the pool. This is sweat. It's hot out here. And yeah, so I said, forget that, don't need those. And we ran those coolant lines to the turbo. So that's where it's getting the coolant from. Then you have the turbo intercooler portion. This intercooler is actually from a VAB STI. I noticed as it was actually on Yahoo Auctions. There was a really good priced front mount intercooler setup. And looking at the pictures, it was very similarly routed than what, like the VABs, all the holes where the batteries are and the side over there, it all has the same thing as like the Legacy did. So I just kind of went for it and said I'll try to modify whatever doesn't work, and it actually worked out really well. But yeah, it's a VAB Greddy intercooler. This side here was actually improvised. I didn't mean to do it or didn't plan to do it this way. A lot of the studies and the ways that I did some research was like the Mighty Car Mods, and there's a guy Turbo Yoda. Those guys are like geniuses with the EZ30s and whatnot. And Turbo Yoda had it reversed mount, where the turbo, instead of it usually going this way, the turbo just goes the opposite way. And I planned on having it the opposite way and going down. And I could have probably did it, but just the pieces that I had, it just was really simple this way. This gives me room for the intake when I finally make it. And I just went with this way. But I'm glad that I went with this turbo. G30-660 and the EZ30. So we'll take a break from the machine gun talk real quick, and we'll actually go into why the EZ30. Why did I choose this motor when there's so many EJ20s, and we're in Japan. You got the JDM EJ207. And the funny thing is we actually got my original Subaru Forester STI. This is actually my original. Those of you like personally know me, you know this is the first Subaru that I ever purchased. This is the JDM Forester STI 2.5 liter, you know, Brembo 6-speed. We talked a little bit about that in the introduction video. And this car is actually the reason why I've been chasing after torque. So torque, right, when you push the gas of the vehicle or the car, that instant power. You don't have to wait for the turbo to spool up, or you don't need to wait for the power. The 2.5 liter has great torque. The problem with the 2.5 liter in Japan specifically is there's not a lot of setups with the 2.5. So used engines and aftermarket parts for the 2.5 liter, there's just not a lot. In this day and age, you know, Outfront Motorsports, you could send them the block and everything. We could have probably done something with the setup, but I was actually intimidated by the 2.5 liter. If it ever blew up, I would not be able to fix it. I was just like, let me go ahead and switch it up. I sold this, I got a GC8, and then I put the EJ207 Brembo 6-speed, full 9 yards in the EJ207. It was a blast, but I hated the fact that there was no torque. You always had to wait for it to spool. I switched from a 16G turbo back to twin scroll. That was fun. Sold that car. Then I went into the Legacy motor. I actually put a EJ20X or Y from a BLBP Legacy like mine in a GC8. Higher compression, dual AVCS. I put a VF37 twin scroll setup on it, and it just loved boost. The high compression and the twin scroll setup just super responsive. And that was a really, really fun car. I got an offer for the car, and the guy really wanted it, and I was considering a new project, and he just got me at the right time, and I sold that one. And then I was like, I'm gonna do the EZ30. And originally the EZ30 setup was literally motivated by simply the torque. I wanted to have a car that had a good amount of torque. We do a lot of the Gymkhana Toge stuff out here, so quick response and instant power is just fun. I'm not looking for huge power, just that responsive car is really what we're looking for. And yeah, from the Forester STI all the way down, it ended up just chasing after that setup with torque, and that's why I chose the EZ30. The funny thing is this 6-speed transmission is the same one that was in that one. It was the same one that was in the second GC8, the third GC8. It's a GDB STI DCCD 6-speed. The Zenki EZ30 or Zenki 6-speed in general, if you have this front end and you have a 6-speed, you have the R160. It's not the R180 setup. They only did the R180 setup with the Koki style Legacy. So I did Super Dave's custom races, and we ended up doing custom drive shafts, which is just getting the crown of the drive shaft. So you basically put R180 inner CV shaft with R160 outer, and you kind of make a hybrid setup. Not very strong, but it gets the R180 in there, so that works out. But yeah, so EZ30 turbo, the routing we covered, coolant. This is a GRB STI radiator, and we just added a filler neck to it so we can have two, and we had to reduce this filler neck to the smaller one because the EZ30 hoses are smaller than the GRB setup. Bottom one and mounting wise, maybe little brackets here, but it works. It's aluminum, not plastic, so I'm not worried about it breaking anymore. Fueling, we did ID1050X injectors with Outfront Motorsports rails. They have a really nice kit where it's just super simple. You get the injectors, there's little sleeves that you just kind of press into the head, and you have bolt-on fuel rails. So the EZ30 typically is a, what is it when you don't have a return line? It's a dead-end style fuel system. So the fuel goes in and it just stops, and then the fuel pressure is regulated before the fuel system. It's your returnless fuel system, maybe. And so we changed it to the parallel fuel system like you see often in the EJ20 setup and whatnot. And we have the AEM fuel pressure regulator. I have a DEFI fuel pressure gauge that's physically in front of the actual inside of the steering wheel. But yeah, that's kind of the basics of what we did for the turbo setup. So one thing I did have an issue with, which wasn't too difficult to figure it out and find out the solution, but it was difficult to execute because I got a Haltech 2500 ECU with the patch harness where it's like a plug and play patch harness that goes from your OEM ECU connectors to the Haltech. You don't have to do any wiring. And that is one thing that I told myself I wasn't going to do on this car. I'm not going to do no merges. I'm not going to do any wiring. I just want a simple platform, turbocharge it, and then tune the OEM ECU. You could. Unfortunately, the person that I was trying to get that worked out with just wasn't really available to my schedule. Didn't work out. So I said, forget it. I'm just going to go ahead and plug up this Haltech to it. And it wasn't that simple. There's a Zenki and Kolke style harness. This is a Zenki model, but for whatever reason, the harness was a Kolke. It was crazy. The plug and play harness was not a plug and play. Reached out to Haltech. They gave me some pointers and looked up. There's on Facebook, you might see him around too. Aaron Gipp. He knows a lot about these cars and just kind of tossing around ideas, we found out that, yeah, the pinout was just different. So my solution to it was I got both pinouts for both setups, and I literally changed my pinouts to the Zenki style setup. I literally went to, Haltech gave me their diagram, and kind of, it just worked out, and I had to repin the ECU. I got some pictures of that too. Yeah, that's gonna be, yeah, I didn't want to do that, but it is what it is. And now it's running perfectly fine with the Haltech ECU, and it's great. It's super fun. I also have water methanol set up with this, and that's why you can see this is the intake air temp sensor, which is needed to run speed density with the Haltech. Water methanol injection. EZ30s run really hot, so I want, and Okinawa is really hot. You put those together, that equals water methanol. So that's what we did, and it runs great. Yeah, so just to kind of show you the bottom setup, I will go ahead and show you underneath this, which is the Raptor headers, V-band flanges, Y pipe. I'll show you the 50 millimeter wastegate that we ended up using, and kind of the back end of the down pipe, and the Mishimoto sandwich plate.
All right, so we have the headers here, and as you can see, they're just Raptor headers. And then if you go farther down, we just welded the V-band on there. And then this would be the Y pipe that we had to make. We'll have some pictures there for you, so you can kind of see them out of the car also. There's the wastegate, 50 millimeter Turbo Smart wastegate. Nice and tight up there. This is the down pipe here. Hopefully you guys can kind of see it there. Look at that bad boy right there, that big old booger on the side of there. That was when I was first learning how to weld. This is the car that I learned how to weld on. Good thing it's underneath the car. So while we're also down here, for turbo, right, the first question or the first concern usually is the oil feed line, oil return line, and then coolant aspect. We just use the Mishimoto sandwich plate that also is running the oil cooler that we have there. And then this is the actual line here for the turbo oil feed line. Let's go back up top.
So now let's look on the, we're gonna go on the inside of the car just to show you. Pretty basic. I have the Haltech ECU, the Elite 2500. I have everything kind of just crammed in here. The water methanol adjuster here, the WB1 wideband setup, the DEFI controller units. The DEFI controller unit is for the fuel pressure gauge that I have right here. And then I have the STI Genome gauges. This one here has boost. You often see, what is it? Pressure, temperature. This one here has the turbo oil pressure and water temperature here. Little water methanol light. Tells you when you're running out. It's always good. And yeah, it's got some short shifter stuff. Yeah, so I guess that's ooh, let me show you the seats. I'm pretty proud of these seats. I definitely enjoy these. These are the Recaro something old school ones, but they're refurbished, so they look new. But they're really comfortable. But yeah, so I was kind of touching base shifter linkage, which made me think about drivetrain setup. So we went the DBA rotors, Hawk HP Plus, the aggressive pads, and then we have the Olin DFV suspension, which is a great suspension setup. This is really, really fun. It's got a front and rear Cusco LSD. Front is one way, rear is two way. I have an ORC twin plate clutch. Then we went with the Volt Racing TE37s. I originally had the ZE40s on here and 17s, but with the exhaust headers and the front bumper, it was just really low. So we went with the 18-inch and the Nankang CRS in Japan. You're like, CRS? What is that? Because it's in CR1 in the States. CRS, which is like I guess an AO52 knockoff type thing, but they're great and they're cheaper, so I like them and we're gonna run them. We ran the AR1s before these, but they're considered S-type tires in the Gymkhana events. We'll see what they say about these ones. So there you go. There's the water methanol reservoir, the actual AEM pump, power bar. Just try to keep it clean, keep the trunk a little bit functional still. Yeah, I got some bushings left over, and I have the DCCD Pro, the center diff control, so you can kind of lock it up. Right now it's all rear wheel drive mode, if you want to call it that, where most of the percentage is towards the back. If you haven't heard of that stuff, that's really cool. So the STIs, GDB STIs from like Blob Eye and up, also the Bug Eyes on the RAs, but they have DCCD. So do the older RA V Limited STIs and things like that. They have DCCD where you can control, like, you know, all-wheel drive setup. You can have it set up where it's 50-50 lock, where all the power is going to all four wheels, or you can control it so the power goes towards the backside also, where it's more kind of like a rear-wheel drive, like rear-end happy car. And being able to adjust that, really, it's super fun. Being able to drive it aggressively and getting the back end to kick out a little bit more as you adjust that. Super fun. Like Pro Drive-ish bumper. It's a little bit, can't remember the company that makes it. Shout out to Frank Neo because they hooked it up really cheap. And then, yeah, I just cut a little thing right here. And you can see not much air, but I can see the oil cooler in there. So I might have to do a little bit something else to get a little bit more air through it, like create some type of duct that goes in through here and allows air to get to the oil cooler. Yeah, that's my setup. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It was originally a 6-speed EZ30 Legacy. We took out that 6-speed. We put the GDB DCCD setup with the front and rear LSD twin plate setup, and then we turbocharged it with the Haltech, tuned it, and it's super fun. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and also thank you guys for all the comments on what you guys want to see. Keep it up, keep it going. We're literally reading all of them. We're making a list on different content that we can do, so we're allowing you guys to basically choose what type of videos we're going to be doing. So we've got some real cool ones, real good ideas. A couple guys talking about the twin turbo V4 Legacy that is like so normal to us now, but I forgot that, yeah, the stateside, a lot of places didn't get it. So we'll do some videos on that one and some basic maintenance also, just some different things. So yeah, thank you guys for commenting. Can keep it up and keep tuning in. Subscribe, like, and all that other stuff that every other YouTuber says that you're supposed to say at the end of videos, yeah?
Did you say YouTubers?
Yeah, you said YouTubers.
All right, so Dylan just said, I said your tubers.
Your turbers, daggone.
Your turbers.
Your
Y'all still, you doing all them your turbers? Go ahead and put your turbers in the comments if you're still watching it to the end. Good afternoon from Okinawa, Japan, home of what was it again? Little cars. How I get my daily workouts in. Hurry up, man. What are you man for?
Are you almost ready?
Yeah.